Good evening everyone, I'm Andrew Harper. Normally I work in the deserts of Australia, but tonight I'll be talking about a walk across the Andes in 2017, which took me 42 days and just under 1,000 kilometres, so a little bit different from what I normally do, but hopefully I'll be able to get the story across. All good? Righto, welcome everyone. Thanks for the invitation to speak this evening. I'm going to try and squeeze 986 kilometres and 42 days into 39 and a half minutes. Here we go, it's going to happen pretty quickly. What's this all about? Capricorn expedition. Querencia is a Spanish word that means where an animal, including us, are most comfortable in their landscape. A rabbit in a burrow, a dog in a kennel, a human in a house. For me, I like being outside. I don't like being in homes. Ubatuba is a town on the Brazilian coast where I'll be walking to, so hence walking the inside out to Ubatuba. The Tropic of Capricorn, right through the lower half of South America, Southern Africa, Botswana, South Africa, Madagascar, and right through the guts of Australia. And it more or less, as we all know, denotes where the tropics are. Below us is the subtropics, above the Tropic of Capricorn is the tropics. Two imaginary lines circling the globe. And I first followed the Australian part of that in 1999. I started the trip on Anzac Day in Western Australia on the coast, on the beach, after the dawn service, right across the country, across 4 deserts, through Longreach, where the whole idea began, and finished on December the 10th that year. So around about 7 months. And it was just myself and 3 camels and a dog, so there were 5 of us. It wasn't a solo trip. You're never alone when you're walking or working with dogs or camels. And there was no humbug. This was a journey that went right through the deserts, no roads, no tracks, just pure navigation. Fantastic, exactly what I wanted. So it was a trip that took me through the western deserts, west of Alice Springs, across the northern part of the Simpson, which was extremely dry that year in '99, through Longreach, camped at the Stockman's Hall of Fame, and stopped at the very sign where I got the idea in 1982 when I was a jackaroo sitting on a motorbike behind a mob of sheep, and I looked up at the sign and I thought, oh, I wonder where that goes. And 17 years later, I was answering my own question. Through the forest near Rockhampton, and eventually to the Pacific Ocean. 229 days, just over 4,600 kilometres. I had lost 20 kilos. I was rather more lean than I am today. But it was a great trip. So I sat on the beach and I looked out at the waves. I'd run out of land and I was very much looking for more land because I was in my own time zone. I'd been in it for 7 months. My own little world. It was fantastic. Everything that happened during the day or night was up to me and no one else. So I sat there and I looked across at South America and I thought, okay, one day. But things happen. Myself and some colleagues founded Australian Desert Expeditions, where we take scientists and ecologists out to the desert with our camels, my camels, and we walk with purpose looking at the landscape. So we've been doing that since 1999 and doing it again this winter. 2 years ago it was time for me to reactivate the plan. So hence Querencia and walking the inside out. What I mean by that is, this wasn't a trip about adventure. For me, being 54, 53 then, you know, not 23, it was about getting rid of some head clutter, you know, finding some headspace. Hence walking the inside out to Ubatuba. And with a name like Ubatuba, I mean, it's a fantastic place. You'd want to go there, wouldn't you? And of course, knowing my desert work, often to get to a point, it's better to go in a wobbly line rather than a straight line, you know, and that might be true in all of life. I don't know yet, but, you know, it's better to go around about in a circle. So the tropic in southern South America through Chile, top of Argentina, more or less through the guts of Paraguay and into Brazil. Now, the Tropic of Capricorn, interestingly, is not in the same place as it was 19 years ago. It moves by 15 metres a year. So the trip that I did in 1999, I'd have to go 300 metres to the north. And what it means, quite comically, I think, is all these monuments you see on the road are actually in the wrong spot. But this was just a little tidbit of information for you. So off we went to South America, the rugged coast, way up in the northwest corner, beautiful part of the world, where the tropic hits the ocean. It actually hits this island here, the island of Santa Maria, only about 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre. So we had to get a boat to go out there. And this trip was very different because unlike Australia, it was just me, 3 camels and the dog. This trip was about following roads and tracks and freeways and highways. It wasn't remote by any means. You know, you're following a road. You can't get lost. You either go that way or you go that way. You know, it's impossible to get lost. I was going to see people every single day. I had no animals with me. I had my dear friends Keith and Louise, who are here tonight, who offered very kindly to be support. And they said to me, Brody said, Harper, you're not going to cart 60 litres of water across the Andes. That's silly. We'll follow behind and drop water for you in every couple of weeks. And so that was fantastic because this wasn't going to be a physical challenge for me. I wanted it to be a mental challenge. As it turned out, it was physical, but I wanted it to be an immersion in landscape and culture, somewhere I'd never been before, had no idea. I didn't do too much research. I just wanted to get there and start walking. First of all, we had to start boating across to the island, not too far, and off we went and got to the rather beautifully ragged coast. This is where the tropic hits the coast on the island of Santa Maria. Very unlike Rockhampton. And down onto the water's edge. And there I was looking back out across the ocean towards Australia. On a beach that was not quite as pristine as the one that I had left 19 years before. After we went from the island back to the mainland, I looked back across. Again, this is where the tropic passed through the coast. And off I went. I had about a day's walk, just with a backpack, through this beautiful desolate country. This is part of the Atacama. There's no rain here. Houses don't have gutters on the roofs. It's quite extraordinary. The local folk in the town of Antofagasta use it as a bit of a playground, but no one walks out there. So it was quite a beautiful landscape to walk in. Easy going, not too hot, and it was about 26 kilometres on the first day, until looking back from where I started, which was just here, I got to the Pan American Highway. Now, there's nothing glamorous or romantic about following a highway and walking along a road. I've never done it. In 23 years and 25,000 kilometres of walking around Australia, I've never followed a road. So this was a totally different ball game for me. And I had to sort of adjust to, not walking with animals and trying not to get killed by a motor car or a truck, which many people on the roads unfortunately do pass with accidents. And these shrines that I kept passing for the entire journey in both countries, elaborate memorials to those people who had lost their lives in motor car accidents, complete with TVs and armchairs. It was quite extraordinary to see these things and rather sobering. I couldn't walk off the road because there was a minefield on both sides where the army had been practicing, so I thought, well, I better stay on the road. No shade, no trees. It was only about 30 degrees. It wasn't hot, it wasn't humid, of course. You're in the desert. The only shade was underneath power lines and poles and the railway viaducts. This might be too loud.
It's all about transport here. I've climbed 107 metres in an hour. Train, there's 20 wagons, and there's 3 locomotives pulling it and 2 pushing it. Gives you an idea of the gradient. It's pretty impressive.
And this sort of scene was indicative of the journey to come. It was a journey not about the natural landscape like in Australia and across the deserts in peace and harmony just with the camels and silence and solitude. It was about engines and machines and the impact of man. Back when I was walking across Australia, there were three European chaps who were heavily funded by sponsors to walk across 100 kilometres of the Tropic of Capricorn, coincidentally at exactly the same time that I was there. It was bizarre. I didn't even know they were going to be there. They'd heard about me because I started long before them. These guys were pulling carts and had walking poles and backpacks. I had the camels to do all the hard yakka. I looked at these guys and I thought, oh, why on earth would you want to do that? You know, why would you want to load up a cart with all this water and gear and stuff? That would be the last thing I would do. Now, my lead camel in 1999 was called TC. TC stands for Top Camel, so my cart was called Top Cart or TC2. Made in Germany, 8 kilos, an alt-lead bag with water and stuff and bits and pieces, fully loaded, about 40 kilos, of which more than half was water, and I carried 10 kilos on my back. So this is the part of the journey. Louise and Keith dropped my cart off to me, and off I went down the road. And I was following roads and tracks and power lines and, you know, as best as I could through the landscape. So, you know, this is something that I worked out previously to departing on Google Earth, of course. And the things you saw in these tracks, you know, plenty of time to think, plenty of time to observe, plenty of time for bright ideas. Again, I was getting used to walking alone. I'd never done it before. So I had plenty of time to think, plenty of time to observe the landscape, which was very dry, very barren, no trees, no plants, no animals, no insects, no flies. I'd never been in a landscape like this before, and this is the reason I wanted to go there, to see what was along the Tropic of Capricorn, which was only about 10 k's to the north of me at this point. So this was a complete moonscape. It was fantastic. You know, I found it quite interesting. We don't have deserts like that in Australia, so it was a new experience for me. Campsites were very basic. It wasn't cold at night. I was just sleeping on a mat, or attempting to sleep on a mat with a sleeping bag over me. You know.
Well, it's probably pretty windy, you can't hear me. But it's about 1 o'clock. I've only been going since 8:30. 4.5 hours-ish, with a few breaks. Climbed 480 metres this morning, so no wonder I feel buggered. And I'm at this lovely roadside stop here, very shady. But looking that way, my first snow-peaked mountains, way off. How about that? Fantastic. So, there's another truck just past. We're going to brake.
Wonderful roadside stops of northern Chile. This is where I was, on the edge of the Atacama Desert, right on the Salada Atacama, one of the biggest salt lakes in the north of Chile. And I was about to cross it. Easy going along the road, trucks every other day. This is about copper mines and lithium mines and salt mines, transport and moving stuff. Certainly not quiet and not peaceful, but for me, even though it was along a road that I'd never done, it was interesting because I'd never been there. I couldn't do this in Australia. If you asked me to walk along the Birdsville track to Birdsville, I'd say no. I've driven it more than 300 times. But in a new landscape, quite happy to walk along a road. The mountains in the distance are actually snow-peaked, and this was the first time that I was walking towards what we would all call traditionally the Andes, the mountains of the Andes with their snow-capped peaks. This is in about the 3rd week of October, so winter's over, summer's not quite here. Good temperatures, not cold and not too hot. But walking across the Salar, it's not a natural environment. It has been severely impacted by us digging for salt, these massive network of pipelines to get rid of the rising water table and the sludge. Okay, good afternoon. So I'm going across the Salar de Atacama. And lots of truck drivers.
3/4 of the way across the first part of the salt lake. And my truckie friend Johnny Visa has just pulled up. This is the second time I've met him. I saw him 5 days ago. He was with a friend of his, and he gave me some salt from the surrounding salar. And today he's been really kind, and he's given me some magnesium tablets and some water and some dates and some nuts. So it's good to see him again. Yeah, it's all good.
Hi.
Yeah. Hey.
Hello, Australia. Hello.
Great.
G. Viva Chile.
He was a character. He also gave me a bag of pills that looked rather suspicious too, which I didn't have. Unless you're on the road, you actually can't walk across a salt pan, unlike the ones in Australia. So this was really interesting for me because it was sort of the same but very different. This was a very ragged, jagged, very sharp, impossible to walk over unless you were following a track, and just big chunks of salt everywhere. That's what it's all about, mining salt. I met up with Keith and Louise again. We went up to the tropic sign, which is in the wrong spot, but what they do is they just put a new sticker over it with the correct coordinates. So quite clever. And off we went to, after a bit of a lie down, off we went to San Pedro, volcano in the background. I had severe blisters on my feet, which was totally embarrassing. For the first time ever in my life, I had blisters. I had the wrong boots on, even though they were favourite boots. We went shopping for new boots. I wore sandals. I had another pair of boots that I ended up wearing. So I needed a break here to fix my feet. Anyway, that was quite good. If you're going to have a break somewhere, it's amongst the many hundreds of dogs of San Pedro. Out to the Valley of the Moon, some of you may have been to it, an amazing landscape, quite stunning. Yeah, I mean, and this was a really good side trip for me. Something I could never do if I had camels, and something I couldn't do when I was in Australia, because, you know, the camels rule the day. Out to the geysers, Del Tadio, where I was the only silly bugger wearing a pair of shorts in -10. But anyway, I got over it. And the landscape had changed. Fresh water, life, birds, animals, plants, bees, flies, vicunas, llamas. It was a change in the landscape before I went over the first ridge of the Andes from the Salar de Atacama into Argentina. Keith and Louise went ahead and dropped some water for me, so I didn't have to cart 60 litres of water 4,500 metres over the mountains. The only second town I only went through in Chile, a small village called Sacare, with the remnants of the Inca terracing for farming, which is still used today. And that was really interesting. The water is running from the mountains about 30 kilometres through a system of open drains for irrigation purposes. So it was quite fascinating to see how that works. And, you know, you couldn't get sick of a view like that. Walking towards that, it didn't matter, you know, how tired my legs were or whatever. Campsites like this, in the tent, because it was so cold, it was blowing a gale all day, so you had to rug up and be inside.
Oh, just packing up the camp, collecting the water bladders that were holding the tent down during the night. Frozen. Yeah.
Beautifully cold temperatures. This is on the tourist trail, so there's lots of tourist buses going up to the to the smaller salt lakes to see the flamingos and the volcanoes. So after a while, very quickly, they got to know that I was there, so they'd stop and everyone would jump out and have a photo and everyone would jump back in the car again. But they gave me all this food. It was fantastic. I was just getting inundated with food. The truck drivers like Johnny Visa, he was doing the same. It was fantastic. So it got to the point where sometimes I had to say, I can't actually carry it all. But anyway, it was such a very nice thing to be a traveller and to be looked after by the locals. Unbeknownst to me, Chile had decided to seal the road across the Andes to Argentina exactly while I was there, which meant that it wasn't a dirt road. For most of the time, it was this beautiful new paved one. The road workers were driven 4.5 hours in the morning to work and 4.5 hours back down the mountains at night. These guys were totally rugged up. They're sheltering from the wind. Where they were building this road amazed me. But consequently, I was about the only person on it. It was fantastic. I couldn't have timed this better. And the road guys looked after me. Chicken schnitzel sandwiches for lunch, you know. So, you know, everything was falling into place. I thought, this is going well. The beautiful landscape of the last salt lake I saw. The colours, I can't describe those colours, but surreal. There's no filter or anything here. The last group of tourists I saw, who were from Santiago. And then I was actually on my own. No more tourist buses, no more trucks. And that's me, typically rugged up. Now, I am a chronic claustrophobic. For me to be wearing trousers, let alone leggings or gloves or a balaclava, is unheard of. But it was that cold, you know, I had to. First travellers I met were a Swiss couple who were riding, as it turns out, is something quite popular, from the top of North America to the bottom of South America, taking years. So the best thing about being on foot, of course, is you can have a yarn to them.
Not too bad. Just having a break before I go over this pass towards Paso Seco. And the road in the centre of the frame going over that pass was when I came over this morning. Started about 7 k's on the other side of that. And that pass, the height there is twice the height of Mount Kosciuszko. This gives you an idea the size of these mountains. Not that Kosciuszko is that big, I guess. So it's been a very steady climb this afternoon up this pass, and I'm almost at the top.
And I pretty much had the road to myself. The icicles, the remnants of the winter, it was really top country to observe, to walk through. Some of them all caked in dust and mud. So plenty to keep my thoughts occupied as I was walking the inside out across the Andes. The last few icicles just behind a place where we camped, you can get an idea of how cold it gets there and the snow level in the winter. Keith and Louise on site. At the pass of the Andes called Paso Seco. Now, with the road building, I did 24 k's I think that day. I could not find anywhere to camp. The wind was disgusting because it was narrowing right down through the pass. And I thought, this is not so good. Anyway, I got up to this donga that the road workers were packing up for the day, and he just said, you know, in there, which I did. I'll show you a video now. I look like absolute crap, but you'll see why.
So this is my last night in Chile. Tomorrow I cross the border into Argentina. And the last couple of days have been hard. I climbed up to the highest point today, which is 4,566 metres. But I found that, you know, pulling 35 kilos on TC2, plus another 9 kilos on my back, I'd have to stop every 200 or 300 metres to catch my breath. So it was slow and steady. But it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done physically. I'm just not used to the altitude, let alone carrying stuff. That's what I have camels for. But yeah, I mean, I did 24 Ks today and I did 22 yesterday, so I thought I would only do maybe 20 when I was planning this. So I'm pretty happy with how it's going and everything's holding up. Brain's working, feet are working, hands are working, back's fine. So onwards to Argentina.
I had a bit of a swollen, puffy face there, and I also was recovering from a chest infection, which was the remnants of pneumonia that I caught on the plane going to South America. And I had a horrific cough that only got worse the longer I went. Anyway, it was out of Chile. Goodbye, Chile. Hello, Argentina. Hello, dirt road. Hello, moonscape. And border post. Stuck out in the middle of nowhere. An incredible complex where I was welcomed as the only person who they'd ever seen walk from Chile to Argentina. And it was comical because I got out in the road and they raised the boom gate and I had to go underneath it. Anyway, because people get stranded there by the snow, which can be a metre deep in the winter, they have this great dormitory set up and you can just camp. So I stayed there for 2 nights. The commandant and his superior practiced their English on me. They fed me. It was fantastic. It was a really nice, unexpected break. It was fantastic. The next 2 days, my first 2 in Argentina, were for some reason really hard. I stopped in a town called Cachua. Looks like a scene out of a Clint Eastwood movie. But it was hard going for some reason. I just wasn't sort of in the groove. Maybe it was the couple of days off. So I was at this town here over the border and I had the main chunk of the trip yet to come. I'd done the first ridge of the Andes with the snow-capped volcanoes. I was about to do the second. The third wouldn't be too hard. The fourth I thought was going to be easy. It turned out to be the hardest. About halfway through the trip. The reason that was hard the first few days, any of you who have ridden a bike through sand would know it's disgustingly impossible. And pulling what was now back up to 40 kilos, I found that quite difficult, climbing all the time, but at least I had something to look at. I now had some life. This is farmland, right? So it's not remote. People live here. You know, it's like going up the Birdsville track. It's cattle stations. People live there. You're going through someone's backyard. And I had lots of stinted English, Spanish conversations about camels and goats and alpacas. The chap I spoke to, this farmer, when I told him, I showed him a photo of my 18 camels and he was sure I had them because I eat them. But I was trying to explain to him, no, they're pack camels, I don't eat them. But it was it was a great landscape to walk through. The monuments that the Inca traditionally used to leave on top of the mountains to announce their presence to the mountain gods still happens now with a modern equivalent, beer and wine and gifts and things like that, which people drink and then leave the bottle. And then onto the highway. Tuesday the 7th of November. And a dead straight, flat bit of road to walk along the side of the Salar. It's TC2, marked up. Now I should be motoring along here, but for some reason I've just got no energy. I've got to remind myself I'm still at 3,950 metres. But I'm stopping every 300 or 400 metres to catch my breath. So I hope the reason is because I'm at altitude and not just because, that's a truck. I'm just running out of steam. Anyway, can only go one way. That's right. I think it was the cough that was doing it because I was starting to get asthmatic symptoms. This journey also, apart from walking across South America, was about raising money for Muscular Dystrophy Australia. A dear friend of mine who's only 27 has muscular dystrophy, and I have seen firsthand her struggle to sometimes even get off the couch or get out of bed and get through the day. A very cruel, debilitating disease, especially for someone like her who was a dancer. And I was reminded of that then because I knew that I would get better. She'd be right, I'll just walk it out. But I was reminded about people with muscular dystrophy where the prognosis is downhill and not onwards. Now, I was stopped beside the road. There's an Australian company there mining lithium, and they knew I was coming. The ubiquitous red Toyota came up and dropped me off a hot chicken schnitzel sandwich and some tea and some yogurt and some fruit and some biscuits. And I said, thank you very much. And I sat down and started eating it. Now, this little dot here is a German cyclist. And he was coming along the road and he got up to me, and like all travellers, he stopped. And I was sitting there eating my chicken schnitzel sandwich. And he sort of went up to me and sort of went, what are you eating? And I said, chicken schnitzel, it's Tuesday. Do you want me to make, I've got some in the microwave, I can hire it up. And he went, like this. And anyway, I couldn't keep a straight face. But we had a bit of a laugh, and I gave him half of it. And off he went. And he was just doing a trip on the highway from Argentina over to Antofagasta, where I had started. Some of the things you notice on a trip, you look at the signs ahead and you think, oh no, not that one, not that one, I'd rather this one. Because you can see it in the distance as you're walking towards it. All these little things that keep you occupied for the day, and the things that you never see in Australia, which are sort of nice.
I've just stopped to look at these llamas having feed down in the creek, and a couple pulled up from their old ute and offered me some fruit, an orange and a banana. And it's occurred to me the cost of what I have with me, my camera and my phone and my Gold Zero charger and the solar panels, the sat phone, TC2, the buggy from Germany, the cost of me coming over here and going back home again. All of that, I suspect, is worth far more than that couple would make in 12 months. Yet they pulled over and stopped and gave me some fruit. How kind is that?
Indeed. Across the second salar, the first one in Argentina, to the salt pans, this was welcome. A lot of tourists go there, so I gave the feet a good dousing, which was nice.
Whenever you want to do a video, the wind comes up. Anyway, at the top of the pass, 4,162 metres, and this more or less marks the last of the great ridges of the Andes that I'll cross. I've been over 3,500 metres for about 3.5, 4 weeks, and up and down like a yo-yo. I didn't get altitude sickness, I didn't get nauseous or headaches. I always knew where I was and who I was. But the breathlessness certainly shook me up. Anyway, I've done it.
It was about another 100 metres to go, and camped on top of the ridge. I actually camped right there. And this day was amazing. I dropped from 4,200 metres to 1,800 in 26 kilometres and about 12 hours. It was fantastic. I had the brakes on TC2 the whole time, and he's got 2 brakes. An amazing feat of engineering, the road. There are still trucks coming up and down here endlessly. Toyota have worked out it's cheaper to land trucks and cars in Chile and truck them over the Andes to Argentina rather than take a ship all the way around. It's a really busy road. But incredible landscape. It was just extraordinary, you know. So I was loving this day. I thought, you know, fantastic. Literally downhill the whole way. Typical campsite in an abandoned farmhouse. And the country changed, cacti. I was now pretty much out of the main Andes into the more fertile river flats, change of colour, down to the town of Purmamarca, which is a very touristy town with its restaurants and hotels and all of that. This was a welcome change, my first town of any substance in Argentina. And I got the opportunity to visit some llamas. And I was reminded that I didn't have my camels. That was a great day, but you know, as I said, when you're with camels, you're never alone. You're part of their mob, they're part of my mob. Up to the Tropic of Capricorn, had a look at the sign, back down again, and now it was well and truly off the mountains into the subtropics, so I'm below the Tropic of Capricorn, so I couldn't go across here, I had to go back down, totally different landscape. And I was really looking forward to this because I was going to be seeing, you know, lots of towns, lots of people, and this is where I almost came to grief because I had nowhere to walk on the road. This is the main highway that goes up to Bolivia. Chilean and Argentinian drivers, I hope there's no Chileans, Argentinians here tonight, are maniacs, right? Double yellow lines mean nothing. And I learnt really quickly when I'm walking like this and, you know, against the oncoming traffic, but cars behind me will overtake on double yellow lines, and fair dinkum, it took the hair off my legs, these cars coming past me. And I had fluoro vests on and the whole works. And after that event, I actually went and sat down and had a bit of a breather. So I had to be really careful. The worst part was crossing the rivers on the bridges because there was nowhere to walk. And some of these bridges were from here to the Bathers Pavilion long. And you just, you know, a couple of them I went down on the river, but others I sort of had to just risk it, I guess, because there was nowhere else to go. One of them, the longest one, thank heavens, I could squeeze TC2 on it without being hit by a truck. Roadside tucker, fantastic. Total change to what I was used to in my tins of never-ending tuna that I was eating. And into the lush part of the mountains. Now this is amazing. Quite literally, you go from cacti and barrenness and rocks and grey, and fair dinkum, it just is a line into this incredibly lush landscape. It's just extraordinary. You can see why, you know, many Argentinians go up there to have a look. It's a total change of landscape for me. Into the cities, which was a welcome change, with its cafes and restaurants and all the sins of a city. I hadn't lost much weight, maybe only 5 kilos perhaps over the mountains, so not much. My feet were okay. I was strapping them just to make sure that I wasn't going to get any blisters, but just to make sure that, you know, they were going to make the distance. And I was walking in this sort of country now. No more desert, tropical, extremely humid, tobacco country. I'd never seen a tobacco plantation ever, so this was brand new for me. Quite a bit of security around it, as you could imagine. Howdy. Just looking at the view of the river. It's pretty good. And of course there's always the other half of the view. I don't really know what to say. Except as humans we're expert at trashing the environment that we depend on for our survival. No, back to the relay. Now you might have gathered there's a bit of a theme to these photographs about the landscapes I was walking through. I had to take a photo of that. I don't know if that guy was put up there to keep the load on or if he was just having a sleep. Either way, it was quite impressive. Nowhere to walk except on the stones and the gravel next to the highway. Past sugar plantations, so this is this big change in the country. Afternoon storms every afternoon, which made life rather interesting.
Well, this is good fun. Get about the thunderstorm. And, oh dear. It's all good. This is the queen.
So every afternoon for about a week I'd have that, and you know, it'd pass, I'd get wet and then I'd get dry again, so it didn't really matter. There's plenty to look at as I walked along the side of the road. I was getting used to it by now, really, I guess you could say. The main highway heading up to Bolivia, and I started to think about this a bit more, and not by any means are we pristine Australians. The Sturt Highway near where I live is a disgusting sewer of rubbish. But what I noticed about this was, and I observed it a couple of times, people would just stop and throw everything out. So the rubbish and the recycling, well, there's no recycling, that we have, this isn't just come out the car window as you're going into town. This is actually, you drive there and you just unload it on the side of the road. Now I spent a lot of my summers in my river at home at Deniliquin in the kayak picking up other people's rubbish, and I found this really difficult to walk through. I was just thinking, oh, I need to pick it up. No, just keep focused, ignore it. We can't ignore it. But it started to get me down, really, because I went there to discover a landscape and a culture and be immersed in it, and I was immersed in a rubbish tip. I really was. And I had to camp in that on the side of the road. It reminded me of Australia a lot. That's could be near Rockhampton, so it was starting to feel a little bit like home. Occasionally I'd get footpaths, the afternoon storms, and the last day of walking into the town of San Martin the Liberator, General San Martin the Liberator. So 42 days, 986 kilometres. I was actually in South America for 3 months, so with breaks and things, it wasn't a hell of a lot of walking really. And that's where I finished up about 2 weeks before Christmas. Then down to Salta by bus into the Spanish influence of Argentina. The nightlife, it was Christmas, off to Santiago, and I was reminded yet again of the silly things that we do. Just looking in the supermarket, bananas already come with a great skin, so anyway. This was right at the forefront of my conscious because I'd been walking through all this for 42 days, more or less. And on Christmas Day 2017, off home with Qantas over Antarctica, which I didn't know was going to happen. Pretty good Christmas present. It's fantastic. There's hardly anyone on the plane. When I say that, it was half full, being Christmas Day. But it was a great journey. Home, cup of tea with the dog, and that's it. Thank you very much.